Hi, this is Chris Gore, and I am at the Full Moon offices here sitting with legendary producer Charlie Band.
Well, hello. Legendary. Okay. No, it's funny, sometimes people say, oh my God, you're a veteran and legendary, and all these definitions just kind of suck, I just feel like I'm beginning. This is a business where you really learn something new every day. So I really do feel like I'm just getting going.
So tell me about when you shot this, where did you come up with the ideas? I mean, where did the ideas come from?
Well, what had happened is I've been collecting artwork and reference art and things that I hadn't invented that maybe didn't have a home, images, characters, and I have really a whole room full of it. It's sort of my idea room. And as it relates to Puppet Master, over the years I had collected a number of characters that didn't have a home, didn't have a movie to live within, but were kind of cool. And there was a point in the late 80s, I felt that a creepy, cool movie with sort of super villain puppets would make sense. And had the thought that I would take some of these characters that were sitting around, the renderings and artwork that I had either commissioned or sketched out myself over the years, and put them into a story. And the title really did come first because I had success earlier with a movie called Dungeon Master, and the picture was kind of cool, starring Richard Mull. But I think that title worked well, and I thought, boy, if we can find another great word to follow it with the word master, couple master onto something else that would kind of make sense. And it seems to have worked once. We may as well think of one again. So I had the idea of Puppet Master, and then I had the thought of these characters, creatures that I'd sort of been amassing would make sense as the puppets in the film. That was sort of the first idea. Puppet Master, I had 6 or 7 of these puppets and dolls that I had been working on, and that was sort of step one.
Tell me about the music in the film. I mean, it's very distinct, the music.
Well, I'm lucky to have worked with my brother, who's a super talented composer, was actually nominated last year for an Emmy for his work on a series called Masters of Horror. And, I wanted this, he and I talked, we wanted this sort of atmospheric, retro, very heavily melodic theme. And he really pulled it off. I mean, he's done so many really wonderful scores for me over the years. And I think, the pictures like Reanimator and From Beyond, and of course, Puppet Master, Demonic Toys, they all have very distinctive main title themes. And I think Rick really pulled off a very haunting melody for Puppet Master, which of course we've used for every one of the sequels.
In fact, I noticed that you like the music so much that it's actually the hold music when you call Full Moon Entertainment.
Well, it's either that or you just happen to call it exactly the right time, because there's, I think, 11 cuts on that CD that we put into the machine here so that when someone calls, they just don't sit and wait and hear nothing. But maybe every time you call, for some reason, the Puppet Master theme comes up.
Now, tell me about this hotel, this beachside location. How did that come about?
Well, once again, I was blessed at the time to work with David Allen, who was just a fantastic artist, effects artist, stop motion animation guy. Had the sort of old school training of all these wonderful illusions like forced perspective shots and others. And, we wanted, the way the script went, we wanted to have this large old hotel right on a cliff. In the fictitious Bodega Bay resort, or the Bodega Bay. It doesn't really exist in Southern California, probably anywhere. So we found a place in Pasadena that was a fantastic structure. And in order to establish this hotel on a cliff, on the ocean, David and his team built a miniature. It's called the standing miniature, where it wasn't so miniature. It was probably the size of maybe 2 refrigerators, put together. But it was a beautiful model. And the way hanging miniature works is he literally brought it out to the beach, positioned it in a way in front of the camera with the cliff in the background, and did it in such a way where it was all captured on one piece of film. It's hard to describe it, but I'm sure everyone with their cameras fooled around with forced perspective shots where you'll have, let's say, a person in the foreground bending down and patting someone who looks like they're 2 inches tall. And of course, the way you do that is the 2 inches tall person goes several hundred feet away from the camera, but it's lined up just so it looks like the hand is touching the top of the head of the man or woman who's standing, a few hundred yards away. Well, that's how the Bodega Bay Inn shots, the establishing shots on the ocean, were done. This model was brought out to the ocean. It was hanging in the foreground, so it looked very large, and it looked like the way they positioned it, it was sitting on a cliff. So it's one of the many wonderful shots that David Allen created, not to mention all the stop-motion animation shots in the first 5 Puppet Master films.
Now, what led to the decision to set the first scene, in a completely different era in the 40s?
Well, the backstory, and it's fun now because we've little by little expanded the mythology of Puppet Master. As a matter of fact, we just stopped finishing. As a matter of fact, we just stopped shooting a Puppet Master 9 effectively, which is called Puppet Master Axis of Evil. We just finished shooting in China. We shot this picture in mainland China where we were able to build amazing sets because it does take place also during World War II. It doesn't actually take place in China. Strangely enough, it takes place in L.A. So even though we'll have certain establishing shots, a lot of it takes place in Chinatown. And of course, we were able to build some just terrific sets in Guangzhou, China. That's because the story, at least the way the story begins, is these puppets are created and brought back to life by Andre Toulon, the puppet master, originally played by William Hickey. And that is during World War II. They're in Nazi Germany. He escapes. And the setup, of course, of Puppet Master and Puppet Master 1 is he escapes. He's in the Bodega Bay Inn, hiding out with his puppets. And a couple of Nazis, they obviously find out where he is. And the opening of the movie is they're walking towards the hotel. As we speak right now, they're going up in an elevator. And just before they get to Toulon, who anticipates their arrival, he kills himself so that they won't be able to learn the secret of how he animates the inanimate puppets. He also hides the puppets in the wall of the Bodega Bay Inn. And then, of course, the story in Puppet Master 1 is we cut to present day, which actually now is 1989, but nonetheless, present day when we shot it, 20 years ago. And there's a group of psychic researchers who come to the hotel and begin to figure out, and the puppets come back and come to life. And the picture you're about to see is exactly that. And it's also interesting that for Puppet Master 9, Axis of Evil, we had to recreate the room that Andre Toulon lived in the Bodega Bay Inn and eventually committed suicide to make sure the Nazis didn't get hold of his secret. So we recreated that room 20 years later with the puppets, of course, hidden in the wall, and a look-alike that we shot from certain angles. And it's really pretty amazing to be on a set that looks like the same set I was on 20 years ago, but in China, shooting Puppet Master 9.
Dann gehen wir.
What do you attribute the success of the Puppet Master movies? I mean, it's a 9-film, it's 3 trilogies, it's 9 films. I mean, you've outdone George Lucas, who once promised 9 Star Wars movies, but you've done it with the Puppet Master films. Why do they resonate so much with people? And I remember seeing this as a kid and just being blown away and also creeped out.
Well, that's good. I think that's a good copy line, blown away and creeped out. It's kind of a good thing. Well, first of all, I have not even remotely outdone George Lucas, but, people have enjoyed the films over the years. We've made one roughly every 2 years. It's been actually a longer stretch now, so by the time Puppet Master 9 comes out in early January, February of 2010, I think it'll have been almost 4 years since we've made a Puppet Master film. But I think people find it fascinating. I think small, creepy dolls that either good or bad, depending on which puppet master you're watching. I think they're intriguing. They're different. It's not what you see mostly. I've been sort of left alone in this sub genre of puppets and dolls and toys. Not many of the films are made like this, and I think it's fantasy. It's fascinating. It's not blood and guts, really, even though we have our share. It's not slasher. It's not torture horror, which seems to have been very popular over the last 3-4 years. It seemed the Puppet Master films and other films like it, I think, have stood the test of time. I think people, and especially kids, they really enjoy watching these shows because they may creep them out, but I think in the back of their mind they know they're sort of pretend, that these are fantasy characters and creatures. I mean, I'm personally maybe I'm a little jaded having made so many films, but I'm far more, or I would be far more afraid of a guy, an ugly-looking dude in a ski mask with a big knife, than a puppet, a doll, or even some weird demon, just because, the ski mask guy is real life. I mean, it happens all the time. You don't need to go see a movie. It's on TV. People are getting beheaded. That's real life, and that's really horrible. Whereas I think any creature, character, puppet, doll that is based, in some fantasy world can creep people out, but I think deep down they know it's sort of fun escapism and they're not really real.
Well, you say that now, but we're in your office surrounded by puppets from the films. And, I'm a little creeped out. I don't think I'd want to be here alone at night.
I've been here alone at night, and there's zero creepiness here. Now, keep in mind, we are just a block away from Skid Row in downtown L.A., and if you want creepy at night, just walk down any of these streets. But no, these puppets and dolls are all my friends.
It was funny, just walking to the offices. I kind of felt like I was in a scene from Trancers.
That's true. And Trancers, too. We had our share of bums and hobos. They're called hobos back then. Now they're just poor homeless people, but that's very true.
Now, did you intend for this to be a series of movies? It seems like you're not making one movie, but in a lot of cases you're making what you hope to be potentially a franchise.
Yeah, that's been always the idea. Now, not every movie back then was approached that way, but certainly the hope was always that these would work well enough, or one of these would work, 1 out of 3 would work well enough that we could go and sort of go to series. So they were to some degree looked on as pilots. If I had thought through that whole process a little better, I probably would have, in the case of the 5 or 6 shows that all sort of went to series, I would have maybe been more careful as to developing, the big picture, as opposed to kind of backing into show by show, because in the case of Puppet Master, we have now our 9th Puppet Master in the can, and we're in post-production, but the theme of Puppet Master is all over the place, and it's somewhat inconsistent, and, had I known back then I'd be making 9 of them, or 10 or 20, I would have probably plotted things out a little differently.
To see marriage, maybe?
Most definitely. In a very short period of time, you two are going to be happily married.
Oh.
And you are going to have a little boy.
No.
Yes, you are. He's a rambunctious little boy, but he's going to be a good little boy. And then you're going to have a little girl.
Man, that's really great. I like that, but, do you think Buddy here's ever going to get a real job?
I see retail.
In terms of the designs, you came up with a lot of the ideas for the characters yourself. That's right.
No, I did. My favorite always was 6-shooter, because I was fooling around with that one day, and I had sort of this ninja guy with 6 arms, and I had someone draw a rendering. I really liked him. I didn't know what the movie would be called, or if he was the title character, or, I didn't know much, except I liked that character. And then it dawned on me that 6-shooter is the perfect name for a character that has 6 arms and 6 guns. And then it was David Allen who took the original designs of kind of this ninja guy and said, hey, more in keeping with what Andre Toulon is putting together from the period, what if we make him a cowboy? And it also kind of sounds more appropriate that the name 6-shooter would match a cowboy more than it would let's say a ninja. So, it evolved as an idea. Dave Allen took it the final step, and now we've got this really cool character.
My grandmother's already dead, ma'am.
Well, it's really your grandmother.
Oh, buddy, I'm sorry. Ma'am?
In the movie, there's all these dream sequences. I mean, you wrote the script with Kenneth J. Hall. Who came up with those?
Well, David Schmuller, the director, had a lot of influence in the script. Of course, he directed the movie, and a lot of the way the story unfolds is David's work as well. So, who remembers? This was 20-odd years ago. What I brought to the table certainly was the title and the puppets and the premise. And Ken worked on it, but so did David Schmuller. So, and then of course, since then we've made 8 others. So, you begin to lose track a bit of how every piece came together. But no, as we watched this movie, and we had some cool guest stars here. We had Barbara Crampton, who by that time had already been in several movies for me, Reanimator and From Beyond. Later on, she did Castle Freak, also with Jeffrey Combs, that Stuart Gordon directed. And it's a really cool cast. You had William Hickey, of course, who's terrific, and Paul Lamont, and we just had some wonderful people at the time.
Ready, Carissa?
Yes.
Okay. Now commencing real-time thought transmission experiment, RT-638. Passive subject, Andrea Clark. Active subject, Carissa Stamford. All right, Andrea, I want you to recreate in your mind your wildest sexual fantasy, paying particular attention to the details, all right? Good. All right, Carissa? Begin sequence now. Are you getting anything about a man on a horse in the rain?
No.
Interesting. Now she's running down the beach and she's naked. He's getting very close to her. You're not getting any of this.
No.
Why am I getting this and you're not? This little girl has a very vivid imagination. Hello.
Hi, it's Alex.
Hello, Alex. We were expecting your call.
You've had contact too, then?
Yes, last night while we were experimenting. It was very, very strong.
What does it mean? Why all of us at once?
It means Gallagher located the old Puppet Master's hiding place.
And he's calling for some kind of a meeting.
We also received a call from the White Witch.
Oh, you mean Dana?
Yes, the lovely Dana. She knows the location. It's an old hotel on the California coast called the Bodega Bay Inn. I want you to come along, Alex. We'll need all our collective powers. Dana feels that this is not going to be a friendly meeting.
Well, I don't know who they think they are, just barging in here out of the blue.
They're probably the friends Neil said would come.
They don't look like friends to me. They look more like trouble. That's what they look like.
Shh, Teresa, don't be rude.
Hello, I'm Megan Gallagher.
Paul Lamont as Alex Whitaker, did you always have him in mind? I mean, you mentioned having name actors in the film.
No, never had it in mind. It was a suggestion by our casting people, and this was. I usually approach it differently because usually the casts of these films are unknown actors who, in many cases, are wonderful, and also in some cases have gone on to become very successful. But at this time, again, the wisdom was you need 3 or 4 names, and people were suggested. It was sort of a who made sense and who wanted what money, and so that was the science. It wasn't, oh my God, I've got to put Paul Le in a movie.
And the obvious question: Paul Le hair looks as if it can bend time. I mean, it's very distinct.
Definitely.
Was that a choice, or was that his choice? Do you remember his?
That was his choice. Now remember, even though I've directed many of these movies, I was not the director of Puppet Master. So every nuance is I mean, I was there every second. I was and this is my creation. But David Schmoller, who had directed other movies for me, was the director of the film. David and I worked. The first film we did was in the late '70s. Hard to believe. It was a picture called Tourist Trap with Chuck Connors, which is pretty well regarded film, but the choice of Paul's hair, I don't know that.
But this really is a good cast between like the unknowns and the known actors. I mean, that's what seems to stand out. You actually care about the people in this film and what their motivations are, which makes it stand out among a lot of horror films where it doesn't really matter. They're just sort of faceless, whatever.
Well, it's not a function of the fact that some of these actors are relatively well known or are on a successful TV show. There's so many fantastic actors out there that I've worked with who are virtually unknown, have done work, but they haven't really broken through yet. It's a function of story, screenplay, and how right are these people for these roles, and the director. I mean, there's a reason why these films work or not. It doesn't matter what the budget is. We see $200 million movies that you just go, my God, I can't believe I'm watching these robot battles for 2.5 hours. It's not really a function of money; it's a function of talent, and that's usually scarce in Hollywood.
And did you always have in mind multiple Puppet Master movies? I mean, it started with this one, but there must have been things in this that you wanted to do that you couldn't. But did you have in mind or even imagine that it would get up to 9 films and beyond?
No, I don't think too much about that. I in a way, especially in the last 10 years, 15 years, when the business has become trickier, I hope that every one of these new concoctions, not the sequels, because they are sequels to predecessors that work, but I'm hoping that the new ideas that I've come up with do well enough where we can go to sequel. It's almost like a little pilot, and will you be able to go to series with that pilot? So with Puppet Master, I was hoping we would make more Puppet Master movies, never thinking about 20 years later. That's a crazy thought to even think about any time. Even right now, I don't want to think about 20 years from now. It's like pretty crazy. But Puppet Master definitely feels like something that even at the time, even before we knew it would be this successful, could lead to other episodes.
But that's the thing with most horror films, is kind of leaving it open-ended for the possibility to do more movies. And of course, this does that as well.
Definitely. No, there's no question about that.
Where were these interiors shot?
The interiors were shot in this hotel in Pasadena. We did do some interiors at a Scientology building on the corner of Bronson and Franklin Avenue, I seem to remember. And I don't know how much again, it's 20 years is 20 years. I actually seem to remember that very few interiors, if any, were actually shot at this place in Pasadena. The exterior close-ups were shot there, and the shots of the Nazis in the beginning coming into the hotel. But I'm pretty sure that the interiors were shot at that Scientology place here in Hollywood. I may be wrong. I could have been Puppet Master 2, a little blurry memory here, but that's what I remember now.
Where'd you shoot these dream sequences?
Again, if not in the location in Pasadena, it was at that Scientology building in Hollywood.
I want to talk about David Allen, who's responsible for the special effects. How did you find David, and how was it working with him?
Well, David, I don't remember how we were introduced, but that was back probably in the mid-'70s. And I was fascinated with, I've been a lover of stop motion forever. And David Allen was, at the time, for many years thereafter, the sort of preeminent stop motion animation artist. He was a protege of Ray Harryhausen. And Anyway, I don't remember why or how we met. I just know that when I met him and I realized, I saw how amazing he was, and he and I struck up a good. This is an interesting scene, huh? This picture had everything. It had a little violence and boobies, and it's funny. I don't think I've seen the movie in at least a decade, and I just remember. It's all about the puppets and the puppet master and William Hickey, but you forget all the other stuff. It's like, okay.
Yeah, there's a surprising amount of nudity, and I mean that in a great way. I mean it's kind of lacking in a lot of horror films today. I'd like to see a return to nudity.
Yeah. Well, it had a grittiness for sure. But anyway, back to my story about David Allen. I was about to make a movie, which was maybe my fourth or fifth film, I forget which, called Laser Blast. And Laser Blast, I was shooting that film on weekends around the time that there was a buzz going on that Star Wars was about to be released. No one really knew what it was. There was a buzz even back before Twitter and Facebook and MySpace and the internet. I even forget why there was a buzz, but people were saying, oh my God, it's going to be this great movie. It's called Star Wars. It's a space deal. And anyway, I'm in the meantime, I'm shooting my little Laser Blast movie about a kid who finds this alien weapon that these careless aliens left behind.
I saw it at the theater. And I remember the television commercials and being floored because with the aliens and spaceships, all this stuff.
Back then, those magical stop-motion animation shots that were dropped into those TV spots, and prior to that, probably for 20 years prior, when TV was a component in helping people get to the movies, or trailers prior to that, those were the magic drops you needed to get people excited because they were magic shots, Anyway, I needed some of those shots, and Dave Allen was the guy, and we struck up a relationship, and he started talking even back then about this dream project of his called The Primevals, which we eventually shot, and is still as of yet unfinished for a number of reasons, including Dave Allen's passing. But back in the day, Dave had his studio in Burbank, and he had some amazing artists working with him, who all went on to the big time, working for Lucas and others. And David and I, hooked up, and he did the stop-motion animation shots in Laser Blast, which was the first collaboration that I did with Dave. And they were just great shots. For me, they made the movie, even though if you look at them today, they're nothing else, pretty retro and kind of funny. But people remember that film and remember those shots. And then from that point thereafter, I did a movie called The Daytime Ended. I did other films. And when it was time to do a Puppet Master, I knew I needed some money shots. I needed a few shots of these puppets that would be difficult to do with rod puppetry. And I went to Dave, and he built the puppets, the stop motion puppets of the few. Not all of them have scenes in this movie. And those shots, and the shots for Puppet Master 2, because I promised Dave at the time one day he would get to direct a movie, and I'm usually pretty good on my promises, having worked with, I think, about 30 first-time directors. So Puppet Master 2 is actually directed by Dave Allen. And of course, coincidentally contains the most and the best stop-motion animation shots. And then he did some work in Puppet Master 3, 4, and 5, and then that was the end of that. This is a cool shot, isn't it?
Hello. Did everybody get settled in all right?
Yes, thank you.
This hotel seems to have quite a history, Mrs. Gallagher.
Yes, it does. It's been in my family since the turn of the century. My parents operated it until they died a few years ago. Thank you, Teresa.
Miss Megan, we are just so curious to hear about you and your dear Gallagher.
well. I met Neil when he was staying here working.
Sometimes directors will say that the dinner scenes are the least fun to do. As a producer, sitting on the sidelines overseeing everything, what do you have to say about scenes like this that kind of move the character development along and the plot and the tension between all the characters?
They were great. I mean, as a director, I love these scenes. You know, I just finished a movie in Italy called Skullheads, which I'm real proud of. Will be out in October. Kind of a ghost story. Again, there are these creatures in it because it's hard to make a movie now without some form of doll or puppet or character that will be part of this full moon universe one day. And my favorite scene actually is a dinner scene that takes place in this castle. You know, it is where you get to develop the character. It's you know, depending on who you are, it could also be the filler scene, the scene that you go, okay, I hope that scene doesn't last too much longer. It's like the inevitable love scene in a lot of these B movies that are not terribly well done. You go, oh my God, let's just like fast forward through this horrible scene. But I think the dinner scene is about this strange family. And Skullheads is one of the better scenes in the movie, even though there aren't any skullheads or ghosts or bad things happening. So it just depends. Sometimes they're too long, and this one may be too long. I don't know. They're still looking at it. They're still talking.
Now, we previous to this scene, we saw Pinhead come out of the coffin. Yeah. I want to ask you about each of the puppets and what went into the development of each one. I mean, you said that these are things that you would sketch out and just sort of come up with for fun.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I definitely don't remember every nuance and every, you know, the sort of origin of every idea. But Pinhead was, I used to kid around because I had a sketch in my office years before Puppet Master where, and it didn't look too dissimilar to the way Pinhead turned out, where it was this just big dude in a business suit with a tiny little head. And I used to say, this is, unfortunately, these are the distributors I used to deal with at the beginning of my career before I realized they were really thieves and crooks. So, and then that just became one of the characters in the film. But what's cool about Pinhead, first of all, he has no expression whatsoever. He has one permanent expression, and you rarely see a close-up. And the reason for that is to really make the illusion of a big hulking body, albeit in a puppet size, and a little head. You don't want to ever shoot like a super close-up of the head because it kind of spoils the illusion. Like if you're making a movie with little shrunken people running around, you don't want to close it. You know, you want to have, at best, a wide shot, a full wide shot of their little bodies. And I made several movies actually where we had small people running around, and I used to use back in the day when I could afford it. These were all forced perspective shots, which for those who see, we're just still in the dinner scene, which proves the point. Now, this scene is too long. I don't know what they're talking about. It's too long. But a forced perspective shot, you know, in the simplest form, is where you put an object that you want to have large in the foreground, and the small object that you want to have small, you put it way in the background, but you line it up so it looks like they're looking at each other. And it's one of the oldest and most wonderful ways of, you know, of accomplishing that effect. There's no optical, there's nothing other than just a careful camera setup. And I made several movies, including some films I did for a line called Moonbeam. I did some films that were sort of like Full Moon Light at the time with Paramount. And the pictures like Pre-Hysteria, it's like Honey, I Shrunk the Dinosaurs, and Dragon World, and Remote. There are like 4 or 5 of them. They did very, very well. And in a couple of cases, that's how we pulled off those effects. I mean, we did build oversized sets when we had to, but for the most part, we just had the luxury of working on a big soundstage, and we would just line those shots up. So anyway, back to Pinhead. What's cool about Pinhead is they're still at dinner. What's cool about Pinhead is to really make the effect and the illusion work. I wanted to have not sort of puppet hands or fake hands, but I wanted to have real hands, so that even though he's got this tiny head, his hulking body would have real hands. But in relation to the size of the puppet, the hands, big in his frame, but would still have to be a little too small, you know, as human hands. So we actually found, I'm not sure if it was I think it was a little midget girl, if I'm not mistaken, who wound up playing the hands of Pinhead. So, and again, those are shots that are not easy to line up. Pinhead comes up, looks over something, looks around, then his hands come up or his fist tightens, And at the end of the day, it was a good illusion because it really feels like he's got these big hands. And anyway, that's Pinhead. I mean, each one has got its own story. Jester, that was much more of a David Allen concoction. I had the idea of a doll that would change expressions, but it wasn't the way we ultimately did it. The way we did it is we had, it was nothing much more elaborate than a spinning drill, so that when Jester had his sad expression, he had 3 pieces to his head, and we would have those pieces spin, and then they would lock into either a happy expression or an expression of shock or a pissed off expression. So that kind of gave, that was sort of not Pinhead, that was Jester's kind of cool thing. And it wasn't easy to get those shots because sometimes, you know, you'd be spinning that head like 40 times until the right thing locked in, because it was not an exact science, nor was it CGI. It was an organic effect.
What about Blade?
Blade, I don't really remember more than he was just a cool-looking character with a hook in one arm. Even the sketches, the predecessor sketches from years before him becoming sort of the Blade that we know now, those sketches, he always had a hook in one hand and a blade in the other, and this kind of cool hat. But later on, David Allen, I think the final look of Blade was something that David pulled out. He always had this haunted, cadaverous look in my sketches, but David gave him the final sort of touch. And he also came up with those eyes that when he got pissed off, those little spear eyes that sort of poked out. So that was a good collaboration there. So we had, let's see, Pinhead, Jester, Blade.
Tunneler.
Tunneler was pretty much the way I sketched him out. Again, he looked more like a little soldier dude in the final version, but this is just a guy with kind of a big head who had a drill on his head, and he just bent his head down and bore through things.
And of course, the elusive Leech Woman.
Leech Woman was actually my favorite, I think, at the time, because it was just so gross, and I wanted something really gross. And it's interesting, when we screened the movie, I screened all these early full moon films, which we shot on 35 and finished on 35, and we would have sort of promotional screenings on the big screen. The first screening was always for the Paramount brass, because they were the distributors at the time, domestically in video. And I always felt that, unlike all the other little direct-to-video movies at the time that they were handling, if we screened this on the big screen and we invited their sales staff and our people and a smattering of fans and friends, that it would send the signal, this is more than just a little direct-to-video movie. And this is a cool scene. You know, I have to stop and just look at this scene for a minute. This is actually pretty well done. I like the way this thing plays. But anyway, those screenings were very, very successful. And
was there talk of releasing these films theatrically?
There was, but that never came to fruition. But to finish the Leech Woman story, when I screened Puppet Master, they all felt, the marketing people, that, oh my God, this is going to be great. No one had any idea it would be so successful. Because it really was, for a small direct-to-video movie, extremely successful. Maybe the most successful that year, I think it may have been. But their only comment was, you know, Charlie, you cannot use that Leech Woman anymore. If you're going to make a sequel, she's just too gross. She's just too awful. So they sort of made us make Leech Woman disappear for a few of the future films, until I took distribution back and I started distributing my own full moon films, and then Leech Woman kind of came back. But anyway, that's a little Leech Woman story.
Now, the director David Schmoller said that there's really only 2 types of scares. There's the boo surprise scare, usually motivated by something from around the corner or a big audio burst. And then the other scare, which is one that's used very effectively in this film, is sort of the suspense-driven scare, more of like the ticking bomb. You know something's going to happen, you can see elements of it about to happen, and you know it's coming, and the tension is just increased by the ignorance of the victims.
Right. Well, I'm not so sure if there are only 2 types of scares. That's David's opinion. But I think, you know, it so depends on what the movie is and what it is organically. And I'll settle for any kind of scare. I mean, first of all, personally, I've done this so long, I've seen so many horror films. For me to jump, I'm so grateful to a filmmaker who can still make me get agitated or scared. I mean, it's hard anymore just because I guess I'm jaded and I've done this too long. And I'm not really scared of anything anyway. I'm not really, spiders or monsters or, I don't have that in me. I've got my other issues, but I'm not really scared like of ghosts and stuff. So I'm a hard one, but I mean, my favorite, the horror film that scared me the most was The Exorcist. And I saw that many years ago in the theaters when everyone was scared to death to go in those theaters, and there were reports of people fainting and barfing. And I mean, Exorcist still was the most scariest experience I had looking at a horror movie. And I love movies like The Omen and more recently even a film like The Others. It's just a clever movie that, or The Sixth Sense, another very, very clever film that everyone enjoyed. So I'm not so sure how you divide up all these scares, but I think the Puppet Master itself and some of the other movies I've made, like Dolls and others, that's more of a creepy scare for people who are afraid of. Here's a traditional scene.
Well, I think with bathtub scenes, the scares are, I'm afraid I'm not going to see nudity. I think that might be a scare for me.
Already you're relieved because there is one booby poking out of the soap sets there. So.
That, well, what is it? I mean, let's talk about nude scenes for a second in your films. I mean, you're obviously a proponent, an advocate of having nude scenes in movies. How do you do nude scenes? You always hear about things where, well, you have to clear out the set, and I mean, people are going to see the nudity on the screen anyways. Is it a matter of negotiating with the actors or actresses about what it is so they know full well going in, hey, you're going to have to show this? Is it a negotiation of how much to show or just their willingness, or what goes into putting together a nude scene?
Well, it's everything because first of all, there'd only be actresses in my movies because if we're talking actors, that's a different kind of film. So as far as the actresses are concerned, some have done it before and are more okay with it, and some it'll be maybe their first or second time. And clearing the set is usually just for them to have the comfort of not having 50 guys all looking at their semi-naked body. It's always different. It's always sometimes it's a negotiation. Sometimes it's a train wreck. Sometimes you negotiate and you make a deal with the agent or the manager, and it's that moment of truth, and they just won't do it. They just can't do it, and then you have to work around that and say, you can't, we don't have the budget to go, okay, well, let's reshoot all her scenes for the next 3-4 days, and we'll get some other chick in here to take her top off. You wind up with an actress who is not going to show part or all of her body. But I think that as long as, there's nothing even wrong with gratuitous nudity. I'm not like saying, well, if it doesn't make any sense, it's kind of silly. But in a well-crafted story, I think nudity or semi-nudity in horror films, especially films like vampire movies, I love vampire films. I made a number of them. I did a series in Romania called Subspecies, which I'm really fond of, and I think nudity works. It's part of the fun and the lore of horror films. And you're right, we don't see enough of it because the movies today are more homogenized and more chaste, and they're glitzy, and I don't know. A lot of the remakes to me are not very appealing. Some of the older films, and there's some great movies being made today, so it's not like overall that's my feeling. It's just, well, I see now what's going on.
Well, I was going to say, you talked about maybe there's problems. It didn't seem, at least by the final product, the final Puppet Master, that there was any problem with the nudity here.
Well, it's funny. You usually never know. You don't know the behind the scenes. There, in fact, wasn't. So this is an example of a film where whatever was negotiated, the girl got nude or showed her boobies, and that was all fine. But I've been on plenty of sets where it was not a good thing, and there were problems. But then again, later on, you look at it as an audience, and you would never know that the girl was freaking out. Or I know because I was there, and I also know some of the films where at the last minute the girl would not take her top off, and you can't do much. And
Does that involve using a body double?
Yeah, I don't like doing that because if they have a problem with it, And I think it's kind of unfair, unless it's negotiated up front, it's unfair to put that in because then it really gives the illusion that she's naked and, you know, life's too short. But no, I think it all can work really well together. And I keep, you know, it's funny, I'm looking at a movie, I'm sure you have this with other producer directors, but I'm really looking at a movie that I've not seen in a long time. So it's like, I forget some of these things.
You kind of want to stop and watch the movie.
No, I didn't say that. No, we are watching. We're watching.
Yes, we are.
And we're chatting, and I'm looking forward to him getting.
I mean, this is not just a good nude scene. This is a good sex scene. You don't see often in a horror film. I mean, this is. I mean, even though really you're not seeing that much, there's a lot going on. Screen there.
Definitely. No, I've got a lot of these scenes in my movies, and I'm especially proud of some weird scenes in a movie called Hideous I did. Head of the Family is another really bizarro film that has its moments. So there are quite a few. And when it works well, especially when you add the component of some nasty creature that's lurking and about to do something horrific. It's like...
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's either a testament to the actors here or they both seem really into this scene.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure what was happening on the set, but
here comes Paul Lamont, no matter what. Here he comes.
You're right. But as producer, you have the luxury of, you can be there on the days when it's fun, you can be there on the days where there are going to be some problems you have to deal with, and you can kind of let the production run itself. But on the days when there's certain scenes being shot, you need to be available if there's going to be issues.
I mean, are you saying, do I show up like for those nude scenes and make sure that I you know?
I was leading to that question.
Not at all. You know, I must have really missed the boat because it's never been my thing to. And there's no one's going to come out of the woodwork and say what I'm saying isn't true. I've really never taken advantage as it relates to any of that stuff. I mean, if I'm not needed there because it's a day where I'm not needed, if I'm just producing the show, I'm not showing up to watch some poor timid actress, you know, take her top off. First, I've done this hundreds of times, so it's just not my thing. I mean, nothing wrong with it, you know, and others would be there every second, you know, reshooting the scene,
right,
taking over. But no, it's just not my thing.
What went into the use of these POV shots? These very low. Was it camera on a track or?
No. We used a Steadicam, and there was a special mount that we had built, that the DP had built, to get the camera low enough because it was really low off the ground. So it was sort of a Steadicam reverse. Who knows? I'm not super technical, dude. But this is not. You know, today you get these high def cameras that are this big. You can do a lot that you couldn't do back then. This is still 20 years ago, and this was 35 millimeter. So it was still a big rig and not cheap either. But it was that's just a fast dolly shot. But those low shots were all Steadicam.
But just enormously effective, maybe even more effective than just seeing one of the puppets walk across a room, which again actually saves costs. But I think the limitation actually ends up in a better film.
Yeah, no, because you also know you don't want to show too much. I mean, it's not even a budget issue. You want to keep people guessing and sometimes just hearing. Something to see. This is a cool shot. We know what's going on there.
Right. We don't need to see everything all the time.
No. As a matter of fact, then it becomes nothing. You know, it's just. And I hate to harp on the same thing, but I'm a big fan of big robot movies. I made probably the first one called Robot Jocks. And that was, again, back when the technology was not what it is today. We had to build those robots and go out to the desert, and a lot of it was stop motion. Again, amazing work by David Allen and Stuart Gordon. And, I enjoyed the first Transformers. It was a little long, but, it kind of just felt like fun, and some of the effects were amazing. And I was so looking forward to this is a cool shot, isn't it? Again, you couldn't really show that shot, but this is... I think very effective, very, very effective. Blade pulling that chair with his hook. And of course, what you don't see behind there is 2 or 3 puppeteers and the camera guy and some guys holding lights and someone really pulling the chair. It's like, it's like 9 Indians doing crazy stuff to get that little shot.
What can you tell me about the voice actors for each of the puppets?
I don't remember. That was a minor part of it because they don't talk. There's little grunts and groans, and that I don't remember.
But it definitely adds to building a sense of reality. These creepy little puppets are alive in some way.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I remember that in one of the early drafts, there was going to be some dialogue, and I really was against that because I think we've all seen little puppets and creatures and critters talk, and it's usually a puppeteer, doing a real bad Muppet vibe, thing where you can't see the lips enunciate the words, and unless someone can figure out how to do that, which can be done in CGI and it's very expensive. Oh my God! Now look what's going on there. See, even Blade, just repulsed.
See, even puppets like nudity.
They do, but sometimes it's too much for them, And the Leech Woman is, and I see, this is a good example. I mean, I'm a real stickler for, if you're going to have sex in a movie, then let's really make people believe that they're fucking,
Right.
And I love the movie and it's very well done. He's all sweaty. But if you rewind, which we can't do right now, and see how she's banging him, that's just not happening. I mean, she's doing some kind of weird dance. She could not be really humping the guy with that movement. So, well done, but they're not having sex.
Now,
and the sheet, we had to get an R rating back then, so we had a lot of things we had to cover up.
Now, in previous versions that were done for video, was there less nudity and violence? I mean, I know...
No, this is the one. There was a more violent version, not a lot more violent. We had to cut things out. Again, back then, the MPAA, today, they're a little more reasonable. But back then, as an independent, we couldn't get away with anything. I can't tell you how many wonderful shots that were... Now, see, here's a stop-motion shot. There's a great Dave Allen shot. Him running like a little dude and just drilling her head.
This is a horrific death.
Yeah.
Because everything happens off-screen.
Yep.
And just that image of the bloody hand tells us everything we need to know. Yeah. The bloody hand that he can't see.
And the best is yet to come as Leech Woman starts doing her thing.
I think actually there may be a fourth scare, and that's having Leech Woman barf up leeches on you.
Yeah.
I think is the fourth type of scare.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure we can. Someone should write a book, but there's different variations of scare and creepiness and the gross out effect, which is also something that can be kind of fun. But okay, here she is. I was just waiting for her.
And this is the first time we're seeing Leech Woman in the movie.
It's really very well done. Really happy with this. I was there when we shot this scene. I wanted to be very sure. See, I was much more interested in this than the naked chick in the bathtub.
The puppetry is what you're committed to.
Puppetry, yeah, because it's not easy to pull this off and to make these puppets look real, even though we had several heads for her, but it was even gross when we were watching this because there's one moment where the leash just kind of just spurts out of her mouth, and it's definitely gross. But today we've seen so much. See, that's the other problem. People don't know. I mean, if you were around and you're a young kid and you watched this movie for the first time 20 years ago, that's 20 years of stuff. Isn't that disgusting?
Well, I wanted to ask, are those real leeches? What are they?
No, of course not.
Okay.
Real leeches. They look pretty good.
They look really good.
But, there's a certain factor of people having seen so much in the last 10 or 20 years that something like this maybe will be forever kind of gross. But a lot of what we see today, we've seen before so many times that these things lose their effectiveness. So that's why I think you have to rely more and more on well-told stories and characters you care about, and that was a pretty cool scene.
Well, just the idea of those leeches being dispersed onto his chest is... I mean, it's I don't care how much CGI or how much you've seen. This is still a scene that's difficult to watch.
Well, there's no CGI here. This was the real deal. And we have a scene. We have a scene in Puppet Master Axis of Evil that I think is the ultimate leech woman scene. It's really very, very, it's clever and it's totally gross. So I'm looking forward for people to see that.
Okay, now if you say it's clever and totally gross, I'm really afraid.
Yeah, it's different than this, but I don't want to. It's so easy to talk about it, but people have to check out the movie and soon.
Tell me about when did it occur to you to actually merchandise the characters from Puppet Master?
Many years later, and that's because we were just getting lots of mail, and it was at a time when some others were sort of breaking into that field, because up to, I don't know, maybe the early 90s, you know, if you were manufacturing toys, your more traditional 8-inch, 7-inch, you know, action figures, you were going through a major toy manufacturer. The independents were not doing that. And that sort of changed, I'm not sure the exact year, early 90s, 93, 92. And then some courageous dudes came out there and started to, you know, make the molds and go to China, and they started to produce tens of thousands of these action figures, and we were sort of in the early wave of that. And we shipped probably from 93 to 95, I'm guessing at the years, it's been a while, maybe 1 million action figures, the traditional action figures of the puppets from Puppet Master. It was a great run, and then like everything else, it sort of petered out. Tremendous amount of competition, the market was oversaturated, everyone and their mother were making these things. And then there was a long lull, and now I'm back doing things that are more upscale, like one-to-one replicas that are from the actual molds of the puppets, and they're all hand done, and costumes are hand sewn, and they're not $10 or $9 or $12.95 or $200, you know. And we do a limited run of 200. They're all hand numbered. We've done some resin statues that we have a larger run of, like we'll run 2,000 of those, and those sell for $29.95. So I'm involved in that as much as I can be. But it all began in the early to mid 90s.
What about the puppets that we're surrounded by actually in your office right now? Are those ones that were used in the movies?
Yeah. These are all the original dudes that were used in the films. And there's usually many more. They're always out on loan, or they're doing some promotion thing. I've got hundreds of them. I mean, you know, there's just a lot of movies. I've kept a lot of it. I mean, a lot of it, some of it I've sold, some of it you lose. But yeah, what's here are a few of the original guys from some of the recent films.
Now, tell me about the director, David Schmoller, in terms of how did you find him? What was, you know, obviously you're the type of producer that is creatively involved and very hands-on with all of your films.
Right.
So that's a different role than a lot of producers, that they're more the money men, so to speak. I mean, you're sort of all things.
These were my creations. I again, with literally maybe 2 or 3 exceptions, they're films that I'll come up with the title and the art, which usually starts the ball rolling, and I'm very involved with the story and the script. And if I'm not directing the film, which I've done a bunch of times, I'll be very close to the director. I'm very involved with casting and very hands-on with post-production, because it's such an important step. So it's a little factory, and it depends on the year too. I mean, the last 7, 8, 9 years have been lean years, difficult years for people making small movies. Whereas prior to that, there was probably a 10-year stretch where it was a great stretch, and there were some years that I made 20 movies a year, which is a lot. And to do that, you need a whole team of people. So you know, you can't direct 20 movies a year, but you can certainly stay close as best as you can to the whole process. So I am very hands-on.
And speaking of hands-on, Pinhead has his hands on her neck and striking her.
And each shot, I mean, I like when he gets up. This is a stop-motion shot, again, one of the Dave Allen shots. He gets up and shakes his head. Just a little touch that makes this so cool. I'm not sure if it's right now or coming up, but you know, you'd have to, and of course we storyboarded all these effect scenes because each shot requires a different approach. And I don't know how many stop-motion shots are in the first Puppet Master. Probably not many. There aren't many in any of these movies, maybe 10. You know, not a lot. But those shots, each one of those stop-motion shots took, I think there's a shot where he gets up, shakes his head like, that's just too cool. all stop motion right now. They have a background plate there, and he lumbers away. And but yeah, those stop motion shots that are average 4-second shots, each one of those shots took probably close to a week, 4 days. I mean, these are, this is one frame, and this is a great shot. What a cool movie. I kind of forgot how well done this was, considering, you know.
Well, the thing is, I believe that the film holds up today because, and is incredibly effective with all the scares and the drama,
right.
Just because it sticks to, oh God, this is, her being punched is just horrific.
That's great.
Punched by a puppet.
Yeah.
But the film sticks to just traditional things that just work with audiences.
Yeah.
And that's why it's one of those things where, you know, if it's on cable or whatever, I can't flip past it. Yeah, I really want to talk about the unique deaths in the film. I mean, it's not a slasher movie in the sense that people just are stabbed. They're drilled in the head and covered in leeches and die in horrifically original ways. I know the horror fans love original types of deaths. You wrote the script with Kenneth J. Hall. How much did you put into concepting the just unique ways that people were going to meet their end?
You know, the thought process at the time had really nothing to do with that. I think the deaths came out of the superpowers or the unique powers of these creepy puppets, and you know, it made sense for you know, this chick to be bludgeoned or strangled to death. It is. I mean, I love these shots because basically she's just throwing the puppet. I mean, you know, I know how it's all done. But it's cool when he gets up again, comes back to life. There's Blade. So we did sit down and well, that's actually not true. I did want the leech woman to kill the dude, kind of the way it all worked out. That was sort of the only one where I thought it'd be so gross for her to spew leeches on the guy and for it to suck out his life force or whatever. That's a cool little Dave Allen thing, the eyeball things that shot out. That's cool. But, you know, actually I don't remember, you know, any special thought going into, okay, let's just find a way to create unique deaths. It just sort of came out of what the puppets could do effectively, you know, and these characters.
Well, just the idea of toy-like creatures having the ability to murder you is creepy right there.
Yeah. Now this shot, for instance, I remember doing this so many times because, again, this is not an optical or CGI. This was a dolly shot. We started with Irene in the elevator, and you got to move over. That little head had to start spinning at exactly the right time, but it had to rest in that expression, which did not happen more than once out of 10. I don't know how many times we shot the shot. This is back when, you know, film was very expensive, and we were very miserly and careful with buying short ends, and today it's all different. It's all HD tape, doesn't cost anything. But, you know, by the time you've done a shot 10, 12 times, you get a little nervous. It's like, okay, now wait a minute. This is film isn't free here at $1 a foot.
And what's your opinion on 35 versus HD? Is HD giving more freedom?
I've been well, for sure. And it's, you know, if money was no object at all, and there was just a warehouse full of free film, I'd be shooting on film still today. But that's not the case, and I think you can get a great look if you have the right DP from HD. But it really depends on, you know, of course you have, even a great DP can't light 4 white walls. You need a wonderful set designer, you need great locations, you need a great DP, and then with the right HD camera, you can do a good job. You know? And it's very cost efficient.
Can you tell me if there's any truth to the rumor that Puppet Master will be remade in 3D?
Well, it's my idea. It's not a rumor. I'd love to see that happen, and I'd love to see it be remade as a big, when I say big, as a theatrical film, but not losing any of its charm and roots and what made the first one, you know, different and successful. But you know, I've made several 3D movies. I made a movie called Metal Storm that Universal released. And then later on, before that actually, I made a film called Parasite, which was Demi Moore's first film. And I made a third film, which few people have seen in 3D, called The Creeps, just because I couldn't afford the distribution. So I've had a lot of 3D experience, and I love 3D. And 3D would blend really well with Puppet Master, because the most effective use of 3D, obviously you want to have things poking out at you and scaring you, and the smaller the object, the more that object can poke into the depth of the audience. And nothing's more perfect than all these puppets, you know, whether it's Tunneler going at you with his blade, or Blade trying to, you know, spear you, or Leech Woman dropping a leech into the audience. These are all things that would work extremely well with the 3D technology. So yeah, it'd be great to be able to make a theatrical Puppet Master 3D. That's the plan. Now, when and if that'll happen depends on God knows what, but that's on the drawing boards.
And technology does exist to actually take a movie that was not shot in 3D and actually make it 3D.
No, I mean, yeah, we call it faux 3D. I mean, yeah, you know, it's like taking a mono track and trying to do a little faux stereo. You can get some of the effect, but to really get the true effect of 3D, both the depth and things poking out at you, you really need to shoot it in 3D with the right gear.
What do you think about the resurgence of 3D now? I mean, 3D is really become big with, you know, modern Hollywood blockbusters. They really kind of see it as a savior to get people to go to IMAX screens.
Yeah. I think it's great. I love it. I think 3D, you know, to me, since I exist for the most part in the home, as home entertainment guy, whether it's VHS, DVD, and now, you know, we've got about 40 of our movies up on iTunes, and, you know, we go out on VOD and pay-per-view. I'm looking forward to the day when 3D will be very effective in the home, which it still isn't. That's the only bummer. You know, with all the hoopla about 3D today, and justifiably, you know, the 3D movies you go see today with the new technology and the glasses are really cool. But it does not yet work at home. It will. I think we're around the corner. But when that happens, we'll be making some movies in 3D again, just for, you know, direct to home as opposed to direct to video.
Now, in terms of shooting in 3D, what kind of problems does that create?
None really. It's, you know, it's a different thought process. It's a little more expensive. You, as a director, you have to organize and orchestrate and choreograph your shots so that, you know, that it makes sense in a 3D medium. And that's always funny, because still most of these 3D movies will be seen on TV in 2D, and therefore, you know, if you look at even my few movies, you'll see bizarre scenes where blood seems to be coming at the camera and people seem to be poking holes. None of it makes sense in a 2D format, and that's just because it was designed for 3D. So as a director, you know you want to make the 3D work as good as possible, but you also know that for the most part, most people are going to see the movie in 2D, and that therefore they're going to wonder, why is this director doing all this weird stuff, poking things at the lens? You know, why?
When you're making these films, and obviously there seems with lots of sex, lots of violence, is there effort put into doing different versions of certain scenes, or at least shots that can save you, so to speak, so that you can have, say, an airline version or a version that's for, you know, just regular television?
You know, we will do cover shots as best as we can, but more and more I care less and less about it. I'll make the film I want to make, and then because the market is so restrictive too, if there was a time when our films would pretty reliably go to syndication, would go on cable, even some airline exposure, and then it became a little more of the part of the process. Today it's very rare. It's just not on the cards. The majors have sort of taken over and own the airwaves. So, you know, if out of the blue someone would want one of these movies for a syndicated run, or let's say a late night network, and they would say, you know something, you've got, these scenes have to be, you got some boobies flying around here. I mean, I'd just go reshoot it. I'd fix it. I mean, it'd be a pleasure to go and adjust those scenes to you know, get the right sort of rating. Not a problem. well, what's going on here? This is the very end of the movie. Some creepy stuff about to happen.
Now, in terms of the writing process, when you were doing this, did it start with the designs of the characters and then building the world?
No, not really. You know, it was my story. Several people worked on it, on the script, including David Schmoller. You know, I just wanted to tell the story about these puppets and this old puppeteer. And what was more fascinating to me was the backstory and where he came from. And that's why most people feel that Puppet Master 3, which takes place prior to Puppet Master 1 in Nazi Germany, is the better of the Puppet Master films. I'm not sure that's true. I think 1 and 3, I think they're all kind of fun and good in different ways. They're certainly different because of the different directors and the different puppet masters and you know, that we had to find and use over the years. But I like the World War II vintage Puppet Master 3, and that's why I chose in Puppet Master Axis of Evil, which is technically Puppet Master 9, to make it take place during World War II. So you've got the best of all those worlds, and it takes also place to some degree in Chinatown and LA. You've got Nazis, you got Japs, you got the whole World War II thing going on. So I like that era, but really this story sort of wrote itself because of the way we approached it with these. You know, part of the problem was the original idea was to make it a 1940s era film, but in discussing it with some of the other creative people involved and talking to the Paramount folk, everyone was leaning more towards a modern day, a current day story. But it needed to start back when the Puppet Master was killed, which was in the early 40s.
But it's interesting because the opening shot, one of the opening shots of the film is a record being played.
Right.
Which immediately puts it in a certain era.
Right.
I mean, most horror film fans today probably weren't around when records were. Guys like us, we remember records.
We remember records, yeah. That's true. That's true.
But it's not quite as romantic to pull up a playlist on iTunes or on your iPod.
Open the movie up with a shot of an iPod is not the same.
Not as exciting.
No, this is a cool film. You know, it really started Full Moon. Prior to Full Moon, I had a company called Empire, and Empire made movies. The movies that made the most, that were the most successful. They were all theatrically released because Empire had a theatrical distribution arm. I did a movie called Ghoulies with a very young Mariska Hargitay. It was her first film, and Ghoulies did extremely well. Released in the early '80s, and from the profits of Ghoulies and being on some kind of a roll, we made, I don't know, 35, 40 movies from 83 to 88. And there were pictures like Eliminators and Reanimator and From Beyond and Dolls and Robot Jocks and others. And then times changed and the theatrical business was not a good one anymore for...
So yeah, how did that transition happen between Empire and Full Moon?
Well, Empire ended for a number of reasons. Unfortunately, you know, at that time, everything that made sense in the early 80s made less and less sense as the 80s sort of rolled on. We were releasing movies theatrically. That became unaffordable and just too expensive. And we were shooting movies in Italy. I had purchased the ex Dino De Laurentiis studios outside of Rome, famous studio where they shot The Bible and Barbarella, and it was a dream. We had a huge 100-acre, 5-soundstage complex, and my dream was to just keep making all these movies. A lot of the films which people were into that we made in the 80s, like all the movies I just mentioned, like Troll and again, From Beyond and Dolls, all those movies were actually made on sound stages outside Rome, Italy. Most people think, well, they must have been shot in the States. They're all shot in Italy. But concurrent with the theatrical thing not working anymore, the dollar got real weak and things became too expensive in Italy. So everything kind of got messed up at that time, both the cost of making the movies offshore, the way we were distributing them and making some money. And I was sort of forced to sell Empire to another company, and Empire sort of ended that way. I don't own the films anymore. They're all my movies, but they're little by little coming out through MGM. And then I decided to start a company where I would not have to distribute anybody else's product, because that was one of the other problems at Empire. I was sort of forced, because I had partners, to occasionally bring in outside product just to fill up that distribution pipeline. So the idea with Full Moon was just to stay true to my own films, not bring anything else in, go direct to video. Had a great offer from Paramount. And the first movie that made sense to start Full Moon with was Puppet Master. And that's a picture I shot in '89 with my own money. And when it was finished, showed it to Paramount. We had already been talking about a distribution deal. They were super excited, thought it was great. And I made a deal with them, and for about 3 years they were doing our distribution. And yeah, Puppet Master was the first film and did just incredibly well. I mean, it's hard to describe today because the world has changed so much, but if it wasn't the number one, it was maybe the second most successful direct-to-video film of that year. And it was funny, a lot of kids saw it, probably shouldn't have seen it, younger kids. And this is, of course, before internet and email, but we probably got, it's a great expression, see, he turns around with that shocked expression gesture there. But I think we probably got, honestly, a couple thousand letters from young kids and not so young kids, just loving Puppet Master, and many of them would send their own designs for new puppets. And I kept a lot of those letters. We actually bound them in a book and sent them out to some of the distributors because they were just so precious. Some of the ideas that kids had to have other supervillain puppets. I mean, thousands of letters, literally thousands of letters.
But isn't that part of the appeal as a kid, seeing a horror film, is you're seeing something you really shouldn't be seeing?
Oh, for sure. Absolutely. And then the imagine, isn't not about one guy again, one bad dude with a knife. This is about these supervillain puppets. And there were only, 6 of them. So kids came up with all sorts of amazing ideas. See, now I forget about all this punching and fighting here.
Did any of those designs that the kids come up with ever inspire anything?
They didn't, although I'll have to find that book since there could be a gem in there that we've long forgotten about. No, but there were some really funny ones. There was I remember one kid came up with the gas puppet. He'd just make horrible, stinky gas to ward off enemies and villains. And they would draw them too. You know how little kids draw their little ideas, and there were so many drawings that were really classics.
It's funny just watching a scene like this where the puppets are there, just knowing what they're capable of makes this scene extra scary. Knowing that any of them could pop out at any moment.
Yeah, it's a great shot.
And do what Pinhead's about to do.
Right. No, it's true. It's true. Well, that was part of the idea, is that these were originally, of course, inanimate objects that come to life. So I thought it'd be really cool to have them during these fight scenes literally drop dead and be still, like just a lifeless puppet, and then come back to life. And, I've seen, I guess, that's a great shot. Pinhead getting his head popped off. And again, David Allen, boy, he goes there and does a great shot of Pinhead looking for his head. There's another David Allen.
Oh! That's... Just to be trapped in the elevator with that... Oh, God.
It's not good. It's not a good thing.
Oh.
And see, that once again, they just lie there lifelessly.
But not for long.
Not for long. Not for long.
How much?
This is a great shot. This is a great Dave Allen shot.
Oh.
It's so perfect.
Pinhead's lost his head.
So yeah, as an adult, you make this movie. It's got its moments, but I can only imagine little kids who snuck down and saw this, and how impactful this was for a little 7, 8-year-old dude who's like, oh my God, must have freaked the crap out of him. Yeah, so I would be telling stories about all these little kids who would get scared and write letters saying maybe lose a lot of sleep, and many times people would come up now in their early 30s and go, dude, I was one of those guys, he scared the crap out of me. Look at those fingers. Oh man, gross.
Well, I want to ask you, how much did the film change from script to when it was being shot? And then again, how did it change from what was shot to in the editing process?
The success of these movies, and it's, of course, we're talking over this gross scene, and that's too crazy. I like how he's like holding his head and shaking it. And I like how Paul manages kind of looking through that grate there. The success of these movies really depends on a tight script that is executed as close to what's on the written page as possible. And I must say that most of these shows work out that way. The script is pretty much what you're looking at, and post just made it all, work as best as possible. The score helps a lot. My brother's music is really terrific. For a small, low-budget movie, these are pictures made, I think we shot, it was a 3-week shoot, if I'm not mistaken. 20-day shoot, possibly 18 days. Oh, here goes Leech Woman.
Yeah, now, when you've got all the puppets, one puppet can certainly off someone.
Right.
But when you've got them all there.
Now that bleach is ridiculously big. I don't know how we even got that through her throat. But, there's no chance. There's no chance. Every time Leech Woman spits up a leech, she looks more fucked up. She looks ridiculous. And of course, no better place than to cram a leech but the mouth.
Right. But, when you're shooting a scene like this, it has to sometimes seem kind of ridiculous at some point. He's pinned to the ground by all these puppets.
All this is ridiculous.
But in the movie, with enhanced by sound and the sound effects, especially, I think are the unheralded heroes of horror films, in particular Puppet Master movies. The sound brings the puppets to life.
Definitely, especially when Pinhead cracks his neck.
And then, of course, brings victims to their death.
The leech just keeps sucking away in there. Yeah, but I do remember that screening. We had a screening of about 300-400 people. It was primarily for Paramount, so they would at least know that they had something kind of unique on their hands. But we had, the actors, and it was kind of a cast and crew screening with Paramount. People were screaming and yelling and applauding, and you sit through something like that, you have something special, because I've screened up to recently when we don't screen as many of our films. I've screened all my films, and in many cases they got released theatrically, so I was at many showings across the country for whatever reason, and we're going to see the Bodega Bay Inn again, I think.
But, I am one of those people that, maybe I imagined it that Puppet Master came to theaters, but I was working at a video store when this came out, and I just remember how popular the first one was.
Yeah, very popular.
It was one of those that was always out for rental.
Yeah.
And multiple copies needed to be in stock.
Definitely, that's the good news. Yeah, I love that. It's funny. You look at something, no matter how many times, that hanging miniature. Again, if I wasn't clear at the beginning, it was literally a model that, much like I was talking about in the forced perspective shots, that we would take as a big model, a big piece of miniature, so to speak, and we would hang it on a rock to make it look like it was sitting on a rock. And then the camera went so many hundreds of feet back and captured it with the miniature hanging in the foreground and obviously the rock in the background. There's a cool shot.
It's a great tease that...
Yeah, you always need those little teases at the end.
She has...
That was an expensive shot. It's funny, things that you think, you don't even think about. We had to create an absolute perfect replica of that dog. That had to look pretty convincing, Otherwise, it would look the effect wouldn't work.
But the idea now that she has this power.
Yeah, well, there you go. I don't think we ever used that again, but at least there was one way to end the movie. Later on, we refined it to where it was a certain serum, and the thing, it reanimated the puppets. It was a different deal.
Odd that you would make such a cute little dog creepy.
Well, it wasn't so creepy. It was a cute little dog. And look at all these people in there. Paul Lamette. William Hickey.
What sort of memories do you have of working with some of the actors on the film?
They're all great. You know, there's so much talent in this town. There's so many wonderful actors. I must say, in these hundreds of movies and thousands of actors, I can't even remember a bad experience. I mean, you know, sometimes, you know, you get people who are a little full of themselves, or you know, you get method actors who get so into the role, it's really hard to be with them when they're, you know, in that sort of character mode. But with the exception of that, which goes with the territory, you know, actors are just amazing, sharp, very well-trained artists, you know, and it's a very hard business. So it's just, my hat always goes off to them. Every time I do a casting session, and I've done way too many to even think about, you know, I always feel bad for those 30, 40, 50, 60, 100 actors who actually show up for the role. We have to say, you know, better luck next time. Not to mention today, you know, today it's all very electronic, so you'll put out a casting call and you'll have 2,000, 3,000 actors submit themselves or through managers and agents for one role. And then you're going through a screen. Luckily it's very fast, and you maybe find 80 or 90 that kind of look right. And then you bring those in and they get culled down to the top 3 or 4, and then they're all part of that final casting session. But you kind of want to hire all of them. I just feel, because you know every single one of them worked hard, and, you know, read those lines with their girlfriend or boyfriend or whoever, mother, father. You know, it's a hard job. You got to be very devoted. So I'm always very respectful of that.
Well, it's great that you're one of the people in the business who just loves actors. I've talked to some filmmakers that oddly refer to actors as meat puppets.
Well, that's kind of silly, isn't it?
Yeah, but kind of ties in.
Yes.
To this commentary.
I guess so.
Puppet Master.
Anyway, I hope this all wasn't too boring, and nice talking to you, gentlemen. And I'll see you on the next edition of the Video Zone. Oh no, that's a different sign-off. I'll see you on the next audio commentary.